So, Kieran, tell me, what is the difference between using a sketchbook to do your doodles and your drawings and your thoughts to a sketchbook that you're using for a comic strip? What is the difference? Wow, there's a very, very big difference. Let's find out this way. Well, hello and welcome back. I've done a little bit of a talk about the comic, and I've got a lot of questions about people asking about my sketchbook, and that it's a very different sketchbook to the way that they use a sketchbook. Well, of course, everybody would use their sketchbook in very, very different, in a different way anyway. You know, I do see some people that use their sketchbooks in a way that it's almost like a finished product. Like they have put so much detail and so much paint into it. And it has become like a small portfolio in a way. A small personal gallery. And, you know, in my early years, I probably would have done very much the same thing. That I would have gone to the point of working things out to such detail that it almost becomes like you're copying, if you're doing a bigger version, on posh paper or on canvas or whatever you're going to do, you're almost copying exactly what you've done. And from my experience, it gets to the point where you're losing that journey in the art. And I will explain the journey in a way that it's kind of like you've worked everything out, you've had all that drama, you've had all those explorations of adding this color and the way they bleed and the way the paints work, and for me, that's more about the way a sketchbook should work. That you should put down colors, and you should put down colors, and then have these beautiful accidents almost that kind of excite you to do more. But not to the point where I would do something in such detail and then basically copy it onto a bigger piece of paper or a bigger canvas or whatever. That for me loses a lot of that passional journey. And the journey that I enjoy is doing something and working out my problems. If I'm not very good at drawing the figure, for example, which is an ongoing problem with artists, they are always struggling with drawing the figure, then I would draw a figure, and then I would kind of start to break things down. I'll start to say, well, the arms don't look very right, the muscles on there, and I might do a few sketches with different poses of arms, and I might paint them up to get some kind of dual journey of exploring all my anatomy and using some charcoal or using some paint. And that is a very much a work in progress. It's kind of like building your working experience. And yes, it's great. It's a very, very good thing. I almost kind of feel like it's great sometimes if you go out somewhere, and we all have a notebook and a note bag. Like, you know, I will buy little notebooks and little books like this, and I also have a little notebook bag like such, and it is full of pens at the bottom. I don't know if you can hear them rattling around. There's lots of pens in there, always just in case something runs out. You know, you're going to be drawing something, your pen runs out. So I've always got like 27 pens in there. And it's just a little leather bag. It's like got one pocket on it that I'll put a wallet or something, but it's basically a notebook and pens. And that goes everywhere with me. If I go on the train somewhere, I will sit and I will do some doodling away. But because now I have worked for the last few years in story form, in making animated cartoons and making children's books and such forth, that I have found that a lot of my notebooks now are telling stories, and in the way that I don't buy, if I wanted to have a sketchbook that's going to be lots of little paintings and lots of little things like that, I will buy a very good quality paper, and I love very good quality paper, and I've got loads and loads and loads of very good quality papers. But as a general emptying out the head, emptying those two brains of thought onto paper, I generally find a notebook like that. And it basically is a book of thoughts. It'll be some little, I don't know if you can see that, some writing and some doodles, and basically working out a story about a smile, a story about talking to yourself. And there's one here where he's being chased by a banana, and I'm starting to work out some of the elements of the characters. Oh, maybe that character would have this special thing. And that becomes part of the way that I'm using my notebooks, my sketchbooks. And I've come to see them as more of a storybook, more of a... Oh, Mr. Page. And they are just full of little kind of storyboards almost. And they are telling a story. And it's a great way to work, because each one then will give me enough space. This book is exactly the same. It's basically a book of stories. A story about the new year, a story about meeting a friend, it's about falling in love, about madness, about being purple, and these were daily thoughts. I was working out this idea that maybe it would be great to have a daily thought. This is about bees and wasps. And these are all short stories. These are all short workings out of a comic stripped story. And for me, what it does is a couple of things. There's a very good example there. It gets to the point of you getting into the process of drawing your characters quickly. Now, this is a very important process. And that can only really come from either drawing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comics, or drawing hundreds and hundreds of little sketches, little sketchbook ideas like that, where you will draw all these little poses and these thoughts. And what they do is they start to develop your skills about drawing a character. And by that, I'll try and give some examples. For example, you start to think about working with your character. And I'll use my biro as my pencil so that it can show up. And you will get to the point where you will start to, because you're working in a very quick form, telling a story, you start to work out a way of drawing your character. So if a character is running, you might do something in that type of way, that you will start to kind of break him down into a running pose, for example. And although this is a very, very, very basic way of drawing, and it's very, very rough, but in your book, what it's doing is it's teaching you the proportions of the character. It's teaching you the gestures of a character, and it's giving you ideas on keeping your images clear. So for that, then I would have the ears that are coming off, and I might shade in an ear just to kind of give me some kind of idea, and I might give him some kind of screaming mouth. Now, these are all not perfect ideas and not perfect drawings, but they are. I mean, maybe I'd even add his tie, you know, like he has this little red tie that he wears, and it's kind of flapping around him. And that already gives me this lovely pose for the character. And for each character, you will have a very kind of different approach. And this, for me, is a beautiful way of posing out your character. Okay, maybe he's reacted to something. Maybe he's excited. So you would try and do something with his pose and his belly and his head being very, very, very excited. So you're working very fast. And you know, back in the Disney days, we used to have this kind of life drawing class where we would be drawing very quick poses. And the whole working process of that is that you get into a mindset of being able to work out the importance. You know, let's give him a happy reaction there. And you work out the importance of a pose. What is the line of action? In this case, I wanted him to be very wide open arms and happy to receive something. And what I'm doing is I'm bending that pose all the way in that kind of excited form. And the way that you're doing these loose, fast sketches is also working out some of the elements there. The elements of the weight of the body and the balance of the body. And how this character would pose. And I've always had this idea that I love the idea of his 2 feet kind of bending in a little bit. So it's almost like a childish standing. You might draw a child that way, that instead of the feet being like that, you might turn the feet in as giving it a little bit. And that is something that I developed quite early on in the character. But it all come from these rough kind of sketches. So that's in the way that this sketchbooks have developed the story much quicker and developed the characters much quicker by the simple fact of posing it and thinking of, well, what would I do if this was the pose or that was the pose? And that becomes the same for all of the characters. The same in the character of the goose. The goose basically is mostly his nose. He is this big beak, know-it-all kind of goose. And the way that I wanted him was to be very much like a know-it-all. And when you're sketching very, very quickly, you're thinking about, well, how would I give his dominance? How would I give his kind of old general type of feeling? And that type of feeling of your chest out and your hands behind your back type of, you know, yes, I know everything, what do you want? That type of pose will give you a very, very beautiful way of kind of leaning the goose. And he has a top hat. He does. It was a very, very early idea, and he had this bent old top hat, a little bit like my one at the moment. And it kind of added to his character in the way that he is much taller than the baby panda. So it gave this dominance extra character, extra power, if you want. And again, when I'm kind of drawing it in quick form, again with his very large feet, it kind of leans that pose, and it gives me that feeling of him kind of leaning forward, that type of pose. And he was a fantastic character to play with in this comic, and his character was much more difficult to pose, and I found that very early on because of the simple fact that he has wings, and it brought in that problem of fingers. So the pointed hand would be something of feathers, you know. So it would be something in a quick sketch form. It would be something where he's pointing. Or if he's shocked, you might give the arm, which is the from the body, and you might give a angled feather. And that's again how I worked all this out from these minor sketchbooks. And by going through some of the sketchbooks, it really starts to train your mind about how he stands and how he sits, how the panda used to sit. For example, there he would sit almost like in his kind of bare form. He would sit and he would kind of like have these big feet that again were his weight, and or he would sit a little bit more straight on with his weight. Maybe he's got a thinking expression. And again, it's very quick to work out expressions, very quick to work out poses, very quick to work out balance. And you might say, well, I don't like that balance. I don't like the way he's leaning. Okay, I'd have to put a hand down to support that. Well, that breaks the pose. So, right, don't do that. Whereas you might do something a little bit more in that form. You might find that he's like a very, very childish pose. You see the bottom of the feet with the paws. And that gives you this beautiful feeling of it being a bear with his hair and his nose and his arms coming inside, and he's just sitting on a bush, as he does in the thing. And I developed again by drawing hundreds of little flowers. I developed a way of kind of what the flower design would be. What kind of flowers would they be? Would they be this type of flower, or would they be that type of flower? Something. And you work out a lot of the problems and the thoughts and the characters and the style by the simple fact of going through your notebooks and working out, again, a very angled pose there on a triangle form, back to that triangle form. And again, that sitting pose there, if you broke it down, it would be a triangle on top of a semicircle. And that is that broken down into its simplest form. And that was a very, very, very great way to learn and to sketch out your poses. And you will come across very quickly, if you're working in a story form, in a sketch story form on your character, you will grow to refine your character. You will start to say, well, maybe he's too tall. Maybe I should, because the length when he's bending back is starting to get very dangerous there. So maybe I could make that a smaller shape, that I can still curve the back, but I will keep him a much smaller design. Okay, yes. Okay, it does the same feeling with the arms, and it will give you the same feeling but in a smaller, and you start to work out some of these problems through your characters and through your stories. Then the more stories you're writing and the more problems that you will face. Well, how would he climb up onto the back of an elephant? Do I need to show that? Da, 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 da. The other thing that the kind of storybook, sketchbook type of thing will help is that it will also start to break down and teach you some of the elements of telling a story, which is a huge big kettle of fish about going through your notebook and sketching out things, and it's a first run, so you'll go through and you'll draw your story as you've planned your story, as you think it. Oh, this will be funny. Oh, that'll be funny. Oh, that'll be funny. That'll be funny. And then you break it down into images. Maybe he's sitting there looking at the moon. I like that. Okay, how is he looking at the moon? Is he sitting on a bush? Is he standing there, looking up at it? Is he in a tree looking at it? What is the pose that would really help that image? And you can sketch out lots of different versions of it. And it also gets you into that way of working out beautiful images in a very simple and quick form. And sometimes the way I work with these books helps me a lot. It helps me a lot in the way of kind of solving problems before I get to the final image, in the way that a sketchbook should. For example, like with the hands, how do I draw a goose's hand? How would I break that down? How would I get him to show anger or sadness with his hands? Or how would I get an expression with a big beak? And for me, I spent a lot of time drawing the hands. Like, for example, with the panda had these very kind of large, chunky fingers. They were almost like big squares. And if I draw it in a quick sketch form, you will see that he has these large square fingers, and inside he has a nice cute kind of pad, like you would see on the bottom of a dog's foot or a cat's foot or something, in cartoon form. And that again gives you that lovely feeling of, okay, well, I need to break that down, don't I? I need to break that down into colours, and what kind of colours. And that's when you start to use your sketchbook as thought. You start to think, well, it's purple on the outside. What colour would be the pads inside the hand be? Would they be a light blue? Would they be a dark blue? And you could sit and test out lots and lots of different ideas. And that would also help you, but in very quick sketch form, in exactly that way. And I use a biro very often. I use lots of like gel pens and felt pens and any pen that I come across. It's not really a rule. And also, one of the things that you will see is like a lot of these little books that I get, they are not cartridge paper. They are not fancy watercolor paper or anything. They are just simple lined notebooks, for the simple reason that I am using it as a work book. I am using it to work. I am using it to learn. I am using it not as a gallery, not as a portfolio piece. So a lot of these books are very much simple, cheap, £2-3, £4, and you have a book that you can sketch out your ideas, work out your characters, work out your stories in a beautiful, quick, natural form. And it's one of the best tools. One of the best tools you can have is to have a sketchbook that is used not as a gallery, not as a portfolio, but as a working notebook, which is quite often the way. I mean, I have cartridge paper, fancy notebooks that I paint up and draw up and work things out. I might see, I might be out sitting on the beach and I might think, oh, I love the way that is. I love the colors of that. I might paint something up as a reference, as a reminder for something that I might do later. And more on the fact that I'm using it as a reminder, as a taking a photograph type of thing, that I will work out some of the way that the sky was. But there's this element that you need to get, and I do that also with my quick sketching, is that the final piece of artwork, there needs to be that part of imagination, that part of excitement left. if I work out some of the ideas and the problems, when I get down to my final pose, when I start to get to the point of drawing him, and I pull out my trusty brush, and I start to draw the hands, and I start to work out, then there will be enough space there for me to go in and draw it as a beautiful thing. For example, with the hand, I want some kind of the undercolor to come forward on the fingers. So you might find that I'm drawing something that's giving that approach to the hand, that I'm kind of widening that gap in a cartoon form for the fingers, to kind of give me that thick arm. And that, for me, gives me enough space from the sketch to the final image. And it gives me enough left to think about, and enough left to keep the drawing fresh and exciting. And part of my whole approach to art is to keep it exciting. And if you draw it too much and you're just copying it across, sometimes that excitement's gone. You've kind of worked everything out, and there's nothing left to hunt. There's nothing left to explore. So sometimes I find that I need to draw in a rough, sketched, planning out style, so that when I come to the white piece of paper and I have to draw a hand, that I can just kind of go, oh, the hand looks like that, okay. And then I can just kind of like draw some kind of hand, and I will be able to draw the fingers, and I'll be able to have that fun of being able to draw the fingers and to keep it all very fresh and keep it exciting, because I've already worked it out. I've already learned everything from the sketch, the working process. So for me, a lot of my sketchbooks are very much story based. I'll be sitting on a train and I'll be thinking, ha, that was funny what that man did. Okay, that would be great for the panda. And I'll sit there and I'll sketch out a comical idea, a comical story. And it's a great way to work out the story, to work out the panels, how best to show this, how best to show that, how best to come up with a beautiful ending. What is the final image? So that's a quick breakdown on what I was talking about yesterday about using a sketchbook or a storybook, and my explanation for that. So have fun today with your sketchbook or your storybook, whichever you decide to do. For me, I love to leave myself enough to keep it fresh and keep it exciting. So that's a little breakdown for today about the sketchbook and the storybook, and I will get back to doing some drawing straight after this. So I will see you later on for some drawing. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and I will see you very soon. Thank you for coming. Bye bye.